Ahoy hoy, this is Michaela from Team Retro, where we like retro games and we like the devices that bring them to us. So I've gone and done it again. I bought another Nintendo system. And I never imagined myself to own a Switch Lite, even though I've always been intrigued by the device. Something about the fact that it looks like a Game Boy Advance or something more akin to a 3DS was always appealing to me because I always loved Nintendo's handhelds. But I never really bit on a Lite because I felt that my base model Switch and then my Switch OLED was already doing the job, and I never saw the need. But then this Dialga Palkia Switch Lite came about, and I was actually able to get the system at a bit of a discount because the box was dented in the top left hand corner. And to collectors, I can see how that would be a turnoff, but for me, I'm more interested in the actual device itself. And I want to take a look at the Switch Lite as a potential retro gaming device. There are a lot of people out there who like to tinker and modify and tweak their retro gaming devices to suit their individual needs, but there are also people out there that want to retro game, and they don't necessarily have the time, energy, or technical knowledge to be able to do the tweaking involved with something like a PowKiddy or Anbernic device. They just want to buy a system and have games on it and be able to pick up and play in their spare time. And so in this video, we're going to take a look at the Nintendo Switch Lite as one such device. We'll do an unboxing of the unit, run through initial setup, and then we'll talk about some of the retro gaming options that are available to you on this system. We'll also take a look at a couple of accessories, and we'll compare this system to its older brother, the Nintendo Switch OLED, as well as a couple of comparable retro gaming devices that you may also be considering. And this is going to be a series of 2 videos. In this video, we'll talk about the device itself, and in the next video, we'll talk about living life with 2 Switches. We've got a lot of ground to cover here, so let's dive in and let's get started. So let's start with what's in the box. It's a very minimalistic packaging. You have the unit up top, which I just removed, and underneath you have your basic literature and warranty information, as well as a Nintendo USB-C charging brick. Obviously, there's not much else in the box because the Nintendo Switch Lite is not capable of TV out, so there was no need to include a dock or anything. In fact, the packaging reminds me of opening up an old handheld as opposed to a full-on console. Now let's take a look at the device itself. I did put a screen protector on this device, and then during footage I realized that it started bubbling up, so I ended up just taking it off for now. And the reason that I jumped in on buying the Dialga Palkia Switch Lite as opposed to a regular Switch Lite was that I'm really a fan of this slate black look. I didn't really like the white buttons on the original system, and Dialga and Palkia look really good on the back. This is a throwback to an old DS Lite that Nintendo put out a while back, and the graphics are exactly the same as that unit. I'm overall very much a fan of this specific color scheme. Alright, let's do some comparisons to other devices. Here's the Switch Lite's older brother, the Nintendo Switch OLED. And the OLED model clearly has a superior build quality to it, as well as the ability to dock it to a television. But you can also tell it's quite a bit bigger and quite a bit wider, and it's also a little bit heavier. And as far as games go, you're going to have the same options available to you on the Switch Lite that you are on the OLED. So the ultimate decision here as to whether to get a Switch Lite versus a Switch OLED is going to be whether you want a more compact, portable experience, or you want a bigger, better screen and the ability to dock to a television. Another important thing to factor in is price point, as well as supply chain. The Switch OLED comes in at a whopping $349, whereas the Switch Lite is a very approachable $199. So these are the factors you have to consider when going between a Switch OLED and a Switch Lite. Do you want a more portable experience for cheaper, Or do you want that premium screen TV dockability at a much higher cost? And considering supply chain issues, which one of these two systems is easier to find? Here is a quick screen comparison between the two devices, and clearly because of the bigger OLED screen, the Switch OLED is going to win out in this category because the colors are just going to pop and it's just going to overall look more beautiful. However, the smaller screen of the Switch Lite is not something that you should count out. Granted, it's not OCA laminated and it's not an OLED screen. However, it's a smaller screen, which means the pixels are going to be sharper and things are not stretched out. Everything is compact and actually looks really nice. Now let's take a look at a handheld that most closely resembles the Nintendo Switch Lite, and that would be the PowKiddy RGB10 Max. And there's also a newer model, the PowKiddy RGB10 Max 2, and you can get either model from about $80 to $130 depending on where you buy it from. And you are going to have to supply your own ROMs with the PowKiddy RGB Max as well as other retro devices. So if ROM legality is an issue for you, you might not want to consider a PowKiddy or Anbernic device versus a Nintendo Switch. You'll also have to do some tweaking and custom firmware installing to get the most out of the RGB10 Max. And even then, you'll only be able to play some retro game systems up to Nintendo 64 and PlayStation 1 and some Linux ports. You won't have access to the actual Nintendo Switch library, so if that's something that you're interested in, a PowKiddy device might not be what you're looking for. Here's a quick screen comparison between the two devices. The Switch Lite screen is just a little bit bigger than the PowKiddy RGB10 Max. However, the RGB10 Max does have a smaller form factor and smaller bezels around the screen. And as far as brightness goes, it looks like the Switch Lite does get slightly brighter than the RGB10 Max. However, utilizing RetroArch and the RetroOz custom firmware, you can get some really nice bezels around the 4x3 screen, which leads to some nifty customization versus the bland look and bezels of the Nintendo Switch Online subscription service, which the borders and menus around the screen utilizing the Nintendo Switch Online service is actually very distracting and a little bit annoying, and it's especially frustrating that you can't turn them off. Here is the Retroid Pocket 2 Plus, which is actually a Retroid Pocket 2 that I upgraded the PCB on. However, if you're looking to buy the Retroid Pocket 2 Plus outright, you're only looking at spending about $99 versus $199 for a Nintendo Switch Lite. And if you're only interested in retro gaming, the Retroid Pocket 2 Plus is a very capable device that can even get you some GameCube emulation. It also runs on an Android operating system, which means that you can get a few Android games up and running as well. Now, the screen is obviously much smaller. It's a 3-inch screen versus a 5.5-inch screen, but it has a very sharp 480p display, which is perfect for retro games, so you don't have to worry about borders or bezels while you're playing. The device is also much more pocketable. However, like all retro devices, it's not pick up and play. You'll have to do some tweaking and customizing to get what you want out of it. Another option you may want to consider if you are concerned about ROM legality would be a Nintendo 2DS or 3DS system. And that's due to the fact that the library of retro games available to a system in the Nintendo 3DS family is much larger than on the Nintendo Switch family. And there's no subscription service. You buy the game once and it's on your Nintendo 2DS or 3DS forever. And then in addition, you also gain access to an incredible Nintendo DS and Nintendo 3DS library of games, and there are some real gems that are available for this system. And if you want to go ahead and install custom firmware on a Nintendo 2DS or 3DS, then your options increase dramatically, like the ability to install some native ports as well as play SNES and Genesis games at full speed. However, these systems are getting increasingly hard to find, so depending on condition, as well as model number and whether it's a limited edition 2DS or 3DS, you could end up spending upwards up to double what the Nintendo Switch Lite costs. And finally, we have the Anbernic RG351P, which retails at or around $100 at time of recording. And this system, very much like the Retroid Pocket 2, has a smaller form factor, as well as a 3-inch screen. And it can reliably play anything up to PS1 very well. So it ultimately all depends on what you're looking for with your retro gaming experience. If you're just looking for a large catalog of retro games and don't have any issues with ROM legality, you may be okay with an Anbernic or PowKiddy device, or even the Retroid Pocket 2 Plus. However, if you want to purchase games legally and you want access to more of Nintendo's library, such as 3DS or Switch, you may be better off with a Nintendo system. And if you are looking to game on a budget, the Nintendo Switch Lite is definitely an option for you. Running through initial setup is fairly painless, same as with any Switch model. You'll select your language, select your time zone, connect to Wi-Fi networks, and link your Nintendo account as well as create a user. And it shouldn't take you too long to go from initial setup to the home screen. But for some reason, it would not let me perform a software update from the main setup, so I had to skip linking a Nintendo account and wait till I was on the home screen. And then I was able to go into system settings and go to link Nintendo account under users. And then at that point, it prompted me to update and updated me to the latest firmware. And from there, we're good to go. Once the system restarted, I was able to go back into system settings and link my Nintendo account. And I set the Switch Lite up as my secondary Switch because my OLED is my primary. That caused some trouble that I will go into in the next video. Now, I did end up buying a Satisfye Zen Grip Go bundle, mostly because the Satisfye grips, despite the concerns I expressed with them in one of my past videos, really are the only grips out of all the ones that I've tried that feel the most comfortable in my hands. And not only that, but I wanted a case for my Switch Lite that was also low profile for travel purposes, and this case really does fit the bill in that regard. I also got a really good deal on Amazon for this bundle between the coupon savings from the promotion they were running and the Amazon points that I had from using my Amazon card. I was able to get this for about $9. And even at full price, I still recommend at least the case by Satisfye because it's made out of great material. It holds up to 8 cartridges, and it does have that slim profile that you'll want when bringing a Switch Lite with you on the go. And just by comparison, here is the Switch OLED case sitting next to the Switch Lite case, and you can already tell there's a big difference in the bulkiness of the Switch OLED case versus the thinness of the Satisfye Switch Lite case, and here they are just right next to each other for comparison. And don't get me wrong, I keep a lot of stuff in the OLED case for portable docking, and I'll still bring that to a friend's or family member's house when I know I'm going to need to hook stuff up to the TV. But if I'm just going somewhere where I'm going to play handheld mode for a little bit, I'll just throw the Switch Lite in this little case and call it a day. Here's the grip sitting next to the OLED grip. This is just to give you a quick comparison as to how thinner and lighter the Switch Lite is. But other than size and branding, these two grips look almost exactly the same. And in my last video about the Satisfye grip, I had actually said that I would not recommend using a grip like this with a limited edition system, just because the grip may potentially scratch, damage, or leave marks on your unit through repeated use. But as far as the Switch Lite Satisfye grip goes, I don't have those concerns at all. For whatever reason, It feels like the grip actually is floating over the Switch, yet it's still locked in place. And I've taken this unit on and off a couple of times and haven't seen any visible damage on Dialga or Palkia. Plus, since this is not going to be docked into a TV anytime soon, I don't see myself taking the Satisfye Grip on and off nearly as much as I do on my OLED model. Getting into some gameplay here. If you're going to want to use a Nintendo Switch Lite as a retro gaming device, you're going to have to sign up for the Nintendo Switch Online service. And the pricing of that ranges from about $20 for an individual plan with Nintendo and Super Nintendo games, all the way up to $50 for an individual plan if you want Nintendo 64 and Genesis games. And you're unfortunately only limited to what games they give you. You can't add ROMs or buy additional games using this service. But the titles they do have on offer do work very well, and there are enough games on this service to keep you busy. Here we're playing Super Mario Bros. 3, and of course everything's running well and at full speed. One big complaint I have with utilizing Nintendo Switch Online is you're stuck with the bezels that they give you on the left and the right, along with your account avatar on the top left, and on the bottom, those control prompts are persistent, and I haven't been able to get them to go away. On top of that, the system will occasionally prompt you to initiate certain features such as rewind, and you can't just dismiss those. You have to do what it tells you to do before it goes away. So here I am. I have to initiate the rewind feature and go back and rewind to an earlier point before that nag will go away. And I just don't like it. I want my screen real estate to be taken up only with the game that I'm playing, and I really want an option to turn that off. If there's something I'm missing here and there is such an option, please let me know in the comments below. Here's Sonic the Hedgehog 2 for Genesis. You do need to pay the extra $30 a year for the expansion pack if you want Genesis games. But again, at least it runs very well, and if you're okay with paying the yearly subscription and you're okay with only the titles that are on hand, then you can rest assured at least the games are playable. Here's some footage of Castlevania Bloodlines, and I actually started having fun when I was testing playing this game, and this could be one of the games that I actually play all the way through on my Switch Lite. You will have save state support, as well as that rewind feature that the system keeps nagging me about on the bottom of the screen there. So at least you do have basic emulation features when playing these old games. Moving on to N64 emulation. It's not perfect by any means, and in some games like Ocarina of Time, it actually is a shame that Nintendo's own in-house emulator system is worse than some of the third-party offerings out there. But on all the other retro devices I've tested that can do N64 in some way, shape, or form, the library is very limited, and you just can't get a lot of games like Dr. Mario 64 running without a lot of trouble, and it was kind of nice with the Nintendo Switch Lite to just pull up Dr. Mario on the list of games and have it just work. If you've seen some of the tutorials on this channel, you've seen that I've had to jump through a lot of hoops to get N64 running on other retro systems. So even if it's not perfect, it's kind of a breath of fresh air to just pull up a game and just start playing it. And you can see here that even if the emulation isn't perfect, at least it runs at full speed, and I don't really see any audio dips or frame rate drops. Because these ROMs are coming to you from Nintendo, and you're paying a subscription service to play these games without having to worry about the gray areas of ROM legality, at least Nintendo is trying to deliver you a premium product here. And Nintendo's online subscription service is not the only way to play retro games on a Nintendo Switch Lite. For example, it costs about $15 for Mega Man Legacy Collection, and Capcom does a much better job than Nintendo does with their subscription service. They really give you a great list of options here for emulation of Mega Man games. You still have rewind and save states, but you can also change the controls, so I can actually set B to jump and Y to fire. And I could choose not to have bezels on the side, so if I want just the regular black bars on the side, I can have that. And I could even stretch the image to 16:9 if I wanted to, and you just don't get those options on Nintendo Switch Online. So all in all, you're probably going to have a much better experience emulating retro games through some of these third-party classics collections than you are from Nintendo's own service. And if you take the time to browse the eShop, you'll actually find that there are plenty of retro game collections available, as well as some classic remasters of games for systems like PlayStation 1. You can even play Skyrim on this device, which can't really be said about any other retro device. That said, a major reason to want to buy a Nintendo Switch system to use as a retro gaming device would not just be to play retro games. There is an extensive library of first and third-party games out there, such as New Super Mario Bros. U Deluxe. Geez, that name is a handful. And this is a newer game, however, it still has that retro side-scrolling game feel, and there are a lot of games on this system that will do that. And this is still a very solid device to play games like Pokemon Legends Arceus on. And I've actually really been enjoying my time with this game, so we'll use this as the backdrop for Commendations and Condemnations. And I'm going to talk about the positives and negatives of using the Nintendo Switch Lite specifically as a retro handheld. So let's talk about Commendations first, what I really like about this device. First of all, compared to my Switch OLED, it's actually very light and comfortable in my hands, to the point where when I went back to use the Switch OLED after using this device, it felt heavy. And the small, lightweight size of this unit actually makes it very travel-friendly to an extent. You still need to get a case for it, and it may not necessarily fit in smaller pockets, but it's a lot easier to throw in a lightweight case and then subsequently throw into a book bag for travel. So if I have to go somewhere where I know I need to hook my Switch to a television, I'll still bring the OLED in the big old case with all the accessories. But if I know I'm just going somewhere quick, like to get a tire changed or waiting room at the doctor, and I'm going to have a few minutes to get some gaming in, now that I finally have a Switch Lite, I'm going to be more likely to want to just grab this instead. Just because it is what it advertises itself to be. It is a light system. And for those of you watching this channel who may not necessarily feel comfortable downloading ROMs off of the internet or making backups of your own games, or you may not necessarily want to tinker and customize a device, you might just want to jump in and play, and you might be willing to pay the subscription service just to be able to do that, and in that sense, this is a good device. But you're also not just gaining access to retro games, you're also gaining access to almost the entirety of the Nintendo Switch library. And you're doing so without paying almost $400 for something like the OLED model. Now let's talk about Condemnations, things that really need improvement with this device. And my first criticism holds true for all Nintendo Switch models, and that's that the Nintendo Switch Online service does need work. The bezels on the side aren't the best looking, and the persistent menu nags do get annoying when really all you want to do is play a game. And the Nintendo 64 emulation does work, but you can tell there are some visual issues with N64 games that were just not present on the originals. And hopefully that will get patched in over time. The screen is a nice sharp screen and it is very clear and bright, but it's not OCA laminated, so you will see that space between the screen and the front cover. And if you have an OLED model, it can be a little bit jarring to go back to a regular LCD panel, but that's probably just a me problem. It's also harder to go back to a system with a weaker battery than the OLED model, especially considering that even the newer model regular Switches have a better battery in them. So I kind of wish they found a way to put that newer battery into the Lite models. And those two reasons right there, the screen and the battery, make this a hard sell versus getting a regular Switch, maybe getting it pre-owned, or getting an OLED model. Because in both of those cases, you will get a more improved system with the added benefit of being able to dock it to the TV, whereas with the Switch Lite, you are limited to just handheld mode only. To kind of wrap things up here, I am overall pretty glad that I got this system, and I do see it as one that I am going to be utilizing regularly. However, since I do have the OLED model, I do see myself still prioritizing that unit over this one. Alright, that'll do it for this video. Thank you so much for watching. Hopefully, if you've been on the fence as to whether or not you should get a Nintendo Switch Lite and possibly use it for retro gaming, that this video helped you with that decision. And I sincerely didn't mean for this video to become a bash session on the Nintendo Switch Online service. I do like it, it just does need some improvement versus some of Nintendo's past offerings. If you have any questions or thoughts on this device, please feel free to leave them in the comments below. And you can also continue the conversation by joining the Budget Aquaman Discord. I will leave a link in the description to that Discord server. Before wrapping it up, I just want to give a special shout out to my friend Matt, who actually lent me a camera to use for this channel. He's actually a photographer, and the camera he lent me is a pretty beefy Nikon DSLR. So you should already see a big improvement to the footage that I record for this channel. Again, thank you so much for watching, and if this video was helpful to you in any way, please be sure to like and subscribe. Until next time, bye for now, and don't stop believing.